pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
At this time, we'll have public appeals part 1. That's where you have an opportunity to make your appeal, state your name, your address. You have 5 minutes for your appeal. If it's anything for the with regard to the water presentation tonight, you will have an opportunity to speak after the presentation. So if you have anything other than comments on the water, does anybody have anything before? I can't see the screens there. So is there anyone on Zoom? So at this time, if we have any Zoom guests that would like to make a public appeal, you will have to unmute yourself. And if you're able to bring your video up and just state your name and where you're from and what your appeal is. At this time, it would be the time to speak up if you have anything. Anybody? All right, hearing none. We will move on to community minute. Does anyone at Borough Council have anything to bring forward? Councilwoman?
Mr. President, just a reminder that Emmaus Farmers Market opening day is on Sunday. It is a celebration of their 20th anniversary as well. So they'll be held each Sunday from now until November from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. So just congratulations to the Farmers Market. Here's to a great season.
I was at the very first one. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it there someday, but it's 10 years of success, that's for sure. Anyone else with a community minute to bring forward? All right, hearing none, that leads us to our special presentation tonight on our water system. It's going to be given by Garrett Fleming, and Mike will be presenting for us. So he's going to explain the different options and what they entail, and then council will ask questions, and then we'll open it up to the public for questions or comments.
Yeah, so thanks for everybody for having us here tonight. It's a highly anticipated topic. I wish we were here presenting the new community park or something everybody could get excited about, but recognizing the importance of the issue, right? So I'm Mike Brown. I'm a vice president of Garrett Fleming. We're based out of the Harrisburg area. And I've got Lori Kaplan here with me tonight too. We've done a lot of work in Lehigh Valley, a lot of work on this topic of PFAS. This is a very common issue in the water industry right now. You're not alone, unfortunately, in terms of the challenges that you're facing. I've been with Gannett for about 20 plus years. My background specialty is kind of on the water distribution side. How you get water from your treatment facilities, your source, out to your homes. Only pleasure to say, everybody hear me in the back? Just want to make sure I'm okay. And Lori here, she's our treatment expert. She's the one who basically, how you get the water safe to drink it once it basically leaves your supplies. So again, I mean, I think everybody's aware of the topic at hand, right? So we're here to basically, we've been working with the borough on a study, looking at different options in terms of how to address your needs. So again, challenge at hand, you're faced with an issue with your water supply that you need to find an alternative to address. A little background, just, everybody's make sure you're familiar with the water system. You're currently provided supply by 5 wells, all located within the borough. Again, PFAS is the issue at hand. There's an existing regulation in place. 2 of your wells, far exceeded the existing regulation. We knew regulations were coming just within the past month or so here. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, on the federal level, will release proposed regulations that are going to be implemented on the state level. Highly anticipated that they're going to be passed through as proposed. The new regulations are much more stringent than the existing regulations, to the point that essentially, if PFAS levels are detected in the water at all, it exceeds the limit. So initially, your challenge that you were facing was 2 of your 5 wells are exceeding the limit. With these new regulations, all 5 wells are going to exceed that new proposed limit. Okay. So because of the existing limits right now, you're under consent order with Pennsylvania CEP, which basically, that's a way for DP to work with the borough that says, all right, hey, there's a challenge that you're facing right now, you're feeding those limits, let's work together to figure out a solution. All right. So we're going to talk through, again, what we looked at, what we're dealing with in terms of different options. So we look at 4 different alternatives to address your supply, right? So again, we recognize that eventually all 5 of these wells are going to exceed the limit. So you need to address all 5 of the wells. That was something that, quite honestly, it kind of evolved as the study evolved. We went into this with the existing regulations. By the time we wrapped it up, these new regulations were proposed. So we're dealing with, again, one option would be there's technologies that could treat all these wells. Okay, so technologies that could reduce the PFAS down to below the detectable limits. So that's one option. The second option is purchasing your supply from adjacent water system. So you've got several systems surrounding the borough. So one option is actually abandon your existing wells, purchase a supply from an adjacent system and the distributor. Throughout your system, still use all your existing pipelines and storage tanks and things like that to deliver the water to customers. The third option we looked at would be a hybrid system. Right? We'll get into this a little bit, but again, 2 of the wells, the PFAS levels are significantly higher than the other 2 wells. So one option we looked at is maybe you could treat the 3 wells that have the lower levels, coupled with purchasing supply from the adjacent system. I look at it both ways. And then finally, we also look at developing a new groundwater within the borough. And that one, you know, I can tell you now, we found that really is not feasible. Several reasons. The primary reason being this PFAS chemicals, they are highly transmissive. Right? So once they get in the ground, they move. So basically, you know, your groundwater, there's aquifers, essentially underground kind of reservoirs where you're pulling the well water from. Pretty much within the borough, there's a high likelihood that if you find additional wells that produce significant amounts of water, there's a good chance you're going to find those detectable levels in these other wells as well. Just the way that the PFAS moves, coupled with the fact that groundwater development is a little bit of an unknown to begin with. And we've got experts that say this is a good area for groundwater development, but it's a lot of involvement in terms of testing, in terms of what quantity of water is available. There's no guarantees in terms of volume of water is available. So by the time you're looking at permitting, scheduling, capital costs, and then coupled with the likelihood that you're going to be dealing with the same issue anyway, we kind of rolled that option out. So moving forward, these 3 options here are the ones we're going to focus on tonight. So we cross that. Okay, so I'm going to turn to the lawyer, our treatment expert. She's going to talk again a little bit, explain, you know, again a little bit what PFAS is, explain the treatment options in terms of the first option.
So, PFAS, for those of you who don't know, it's not one chemical, it's a whole class of chemicals. The most common ones right now, they're under regulatory limits in around for PFOA and PFOS. I'm not going to try to spell out the whole chemical names, but this class of chemicals is used because they're known as forever chemicals, which is great if you want to manufacture something using these because they last, but not so great when they end up in your water and they don't decay in the environment. They were used for things like firefighting foams, coatings, I think, well, protective coatings, and a lot of other industrial products, things like that. Sometimes even consumer products they were in. Their PFOA and PFOS have been phased out. They aren't being used currently, but they were used long enough that they're still around in the environment. They do pose risk to drinking water utilities, again, because they do last. So if it ends up on the ground, it ends up getting into the groundwater, and it doesn't go; it just stays there. So this was discovered, a while back when they do what they call an unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. They checked for these, they detected them, and that's why all these regulations started coming out. Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has issued a limit of 14 parts per trillion and 18 parts per trillion for these 2 compounds. And that was the level we were looking at, like Mike said, when we first started this study, trying to figure out how to get wells 1 and 2 of the wells below those limits. In March, the EPA actually proposed a new limit, which takes it down to 4 parts per trillion for both PFOA and PFOS. The other 3 wells are right around that level, just based on very limited data we have at this point. So we sort of expanded the study to see what it would take to also incorporate those treatments. There are technologies that can effectively treat the wells or treat the water from the wells. The ones that have been commonly used that are good for the concentration typically found in groundwater. That is granular activated carbon, and ion exchange resin. They both operate in similar ways. They basically absorb these compounds out of the water passes through the PFAS and stay on that material. Again, as Mike already pointed out, wells 1 and 2 are the immediate concern because those are the higher concentrations that are above the current Pennsylvania limits. 3 other wells 4, 6, and 7, based on very limited data that we have so far on the PFAS levels there, it looks like they will also be treatment once the EPA rules are formally done. Right now, it's their only proposed rules, so they're expecting to formalize those at the end of the year. So the treatment process to go fully from planning stages through the design process, and then the construction process and permitting. Standard would take about 2 to 2.5 years to get that fully implemented. Just to go through that whole process.
Yeah. So and when we talk about schedules as we go through this, again, the board pointed out there's standard or typical schedules. There are some potential opportunities to fast track those if we want to work with you, which I think there is some opportunity to do that. So just keep that in mind as we get through this. Again, the second option we looked at is interconnections, right? And again, it's a feasible option. Lehigh County Authority borders the borough on both sides, their service areas. So currently, Lehigh County Authority operates the Allentown system, city of Allentown system under a lease agreement. That borders the borough on the east side. Lehigh County Authority's suburban system borders the borough on the west side. So both of them, decent, moderately sized systems have the capacity to convey water. So we did look at those options. We looked at some other, adjacent municipalities, but Lehigh County Authority is the one that primarily is the best potential. In particular, Lehigh County Authority's Allentown system has excess supply capacity. Suburban system, has supply capacity. They're looking at enhancing their backup supply capacity. So the best opportunity for interconnections with the borough is to take water from the city of Allentown. So we did look at kind of what that would look like in terms of, again, so we don't have, I didn't bring them out, but basically the borough system is currently, less than a mile away from the city of Allentown's water system. So you need some improvements, basically just to connect the 2 systems. Improvements essentially entail pipelines, just constructing a pipeline to tie 2 systems together. You would need a pump station basically to kind of push the water from the city to the borough to maintain your current service levels. And then also the borough's existing system is essentially sized and operated to accommodate flow from all these 5 wells, which are kind of scattered throughout their existing system throughout the borough. Whereas if you're taking water from one point, that kind of stresses the system, and it's kind of the point of connection there. So you'd also need some improvements within your system. So again, feasible, the supply's there, but it does entail, a fairly significant amount of pipeline improvements, capital improvements, and a pump station to make that work. Schedule-wise, again, typical about 1.5 to 2 years between the point of today going through design, construction until you're operational. Again, likely some potential to fast track a bit if DEP works with you on that. Okay, and then again, the third option we looked at is this hybrid approach. Okay, as we talked about, wells 4, 6, and 7 currently are just barely above the proposed regulation, the proposed limit. And we'll talk about costs here in a minute, which I'm sure a lot of you are not very interested in. But essentially, you know, with the treatment component, you're dealing with two costs. You're dealing with the upfront cost of the equipment, and you're dealing with the maintenance and the operating costs. Again, these are filters. You know, a lot of you probably already have existing kind of home filters, and over time you need to replace them. The media kind of gets dumped up, for lack of a better way to put it. And essentially, you know, need to kind of replace that media. So, you know, what we looked at is because the levels of 4, 6, and 7 are notably lower, the operating costs for treating at wells 4, 6, and 7 would be lower than 1 and 2. So we looked at this hybrid approach where you could treat 4, 6, and 7, still have an interconnection that basically offsets the loss of wells 1 and 2. By doing that, it allows you to maintain some control over your distant sources, right? You're not relying solely on the adjacent system for your supply. It also gives you some benefit of redundancy. Now you've got essentially two components of supply. You've got the bulk purchase option, pulling water from another utility, as well as treating your sources. So it's kind of, again, it's a little bit of both sides. So bottom line, all three alternatives, and any of them would meet what you guys need to do as far as, you know, getting your supply below these proposed regulations, existing proposed regulations. So this is the one that probably a lot of people are very interested in, the cost. Unfortunately, again, anything that we're talking about carries a pretty significant cost. We're dealing with two costs, upfront capital costs. So again, we're purchasing some type of equipment, pipelines, pump stations, treatment facilities. So any of the options we talked about involve the capital costs, an annual cost, okay, which again could be your operations and maintenance, the filter media. When you're purchasing water, no different than you as consumers of the water, you're paying for that water. The borough would be paying for that water from the adjacent system. There's a similar concept there. Another component of cost too is, you know, over time, no different than any equipment in your home, you need to replace some of that equipment. Okay, so most of the equipment that we're talking about here, you're going to get at least about 20 years service life out of the equipment. But 20 plus years, you're likely looking at reinvesting some of those capital costs. So in terms of some of these comparisons, some of these numbers, we'll spend a little bit of time on this. What we tried to do, so this column out here, 20-year present worth cost. So we tried to basically take those annual costs, bring it back to a present value cost. If you add in those annual costs over time, coupled with the capital cost, to provide some sort of normalized comparison of each of these alternatives. What we'll see, a couple points to make here. The bulk purchase option, and apologies if my back is turning, you guys look at the screen. The bulk purchase option is likely the cheapest upfront capital cost. So in terms of the dollars that come out of the borough's pocket, you know, this year, next year, whenever that happens, the bulk purchase option is likely the cheapest in terms of the equipment that you purchase. Treatment of all wells kind of comes in the middle. This hybrid option is the highest in terms of capital costs. The annual cost, again, we spend ties into the present work cost. The treatment is actually the cheapest annual cost. Okay, so in your annual cost for treatment, again, there's certainly the physical operation of the facilities, staffing, manpower, energy costs, things like that. Again, over time, so media replacements, all things like that go into the annual cost. The bulk purchase cost, this number here, which is 1.7 to $2.4 million per year, that's highly driven by the cost of purchasing the water. Right? So a large percentage of that cost is the actual cost of purchasing that water from LCA. One of the things I have up here I know is we don't know exactly what that number is, right? As far as what, you know, again, as I mentioned, LCA leases the city downtown system. So the cost to establish that bulk purchase cost is a combination of LCA and the city downtown. So a significant role in what that cost is. So we don't know what that number is. We provided a range. It's likely going to be somewhere in the range of about $3 per thousand gallons, upwards of $4+ per thousand gallons. It does have a pretty significant impact again on this annual cost, as you see. And the hybrid option, as you said, kind of merger of both. It's some of the capital costs, or I'm sorry, some of the operating costs and treatment facilities that said before the operating costs are lower. And then there is a component of purchasing water, smaller fraction of water compared to purchasing all the water for offsetting the loss of wells 1 and 2. When you're building the annual costs, we looked at it again, 20-year present work, as we said again, 20 years in terms of a planning and investment horizon is a reasonable outlook. 20 years again gets you with that service life of most of the equipment. You'll see the numbers here. You know, the 20-year present work cost for the treatment option ranges from about $24 million to $30 million. Okay, and again, that's annualized 20+ years. The bulk purchase option, because again, our annual costs are a little bit higher. You're looking $35 million to $45 million. And then this hybrid option kind of falls in between about $30 to $40 million. And then capital reinvestment, like we talked about, 20+ years from now. Generally speaking, if you look at the equipment we talked about, pump stations, pipelines, and treatment facilities is the primary large equipment. Pipelines, they're going to last the longest of the equipment that we talked about. Pipelines, we should expect you could get well into 50 years service life on the pipeline. You know, any of this equipment that we're talking about, aside from the pipeline, which should be in the ground, is going to be housed in the building. Again, you should get, you know, no different than a home, a significant service life of the building itself. The equipment within the building, pumps by about 20-year service life or so. Treatment components, 20, maybe 20 to 30 years or so, depending on how well they're maintained and things like that. But again, you're looking at a reinvestment 20+ years. So we took an estimate there to just understand, right, not just what I'm paying now, not just what the 20-year cost is, but what's that reinvestment 20+ years. And again, similar to the upfront cost, the capital reinvestment for the bulk purchase is, you know, never lower. It's about, you know, 20+ years from now, you're looking at about $1 million. The treatment options, somewhere in this $5 to $6 to $7 plus $8 million range in terms of another reinvestment 20+ years from now. So we kind of, again, summarize all that up. Again, unfortunately, none of this is cheap. I will have some better news on the next slide. But to sum it up, again, capital costs, the bulk options, the cheapest. The present work cost, by the time you factor in the annual costs, the treatment option is the most economical. The hybrid option kind of falls in a little bit in between, but you know, again, there might be some benefits to the hybrid option as well. All right. Okay, so then that still leaves you with the dilemma, right? What's the best option? Yeah, I wish I could stand here and say this is by far the best option and it's a no-brainer. Let's go with this option. But again, there are some pros and cons to any of it. So in terms of kind of moving forward, what the borough needs to look at to determine what is the best option for their situation. And again, it's unique. It's not necessarily one size fits all in terms of what the best solution is. Certainly costs come into play. I mean, that's going to be one of the primary components of any decision. We talked about that before. Purchase lowest capital, treatment lowest present work annual, the hybrid, or you know, the bulk purchase that you're talking about, highly dependent on the cost of purchasing the water, as well as the annual cost. The treatment options require a high level of capital reinvestment 20+ years from now. That's kind of the summation of the cost that we talked about. Here's, you know, this is a lot of bad news to this point, right? But the good news is a lot of the recent federal funding programs, there is money specifically dedicated to PFAS related issues. Can't provide any guarantees, you know, in terms of where that funding is, if it's available, how much will be provided to you. But you guys are positioned well to receive some of that funding. Okay, you can't make any guarantees, but the good thing is There's dedicated money specifically for this issue. The borough is proactively working with DEP. DEP works with some of the state groups that administer these funding programs. You're already high on the radar in terms of this project, the potential funding opportunities. So I do think that there's a really good opportunity to take advantage of some of that funding offset those costs. And something to point out, again, we talked a lot about annual costs versus capital costs. These funding programs that we talk about do cover capital costs only, right? So that doesn't cover the annual costs. This is something to consider in terms of, again, the different costs that we looked at. If you do have funding opportunities, they cover the capital costs. And the other thing to point out, it's a PFAS issue regardless of the approach to address it. It's all eligible for those funding opportunities. So whether you actually treat the water versus purchase from somebody else, either of them are potential options for this funding that's out there. The other things that you need to consider are, again, more softer side things that, again, are unique to the borough, right? So one is control your existing supply. The one benefits of the option for treatment is the borough maintains those sources, right? They're responsible for that. They maintain the cost control and things like that. Okay, so that is one thing that again to note. You can also look at that as a negative too, right? Again, the treatment that we're talking about is more advanced than the treatment facilities that you have in place now. It does require higher manpower. Like it or not, these regulations that are coming out are going to continue, right? So we don't know 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 15 years from now, what the next PFAS might be. So again, by maintaining your existing supplies, the borough is then responsible for treating whatever the next regulation that comes up is. And the adjacent systems are a little bit larger, able to kind of manage some of these things that come up a little bit easier. So the staffing and maintenance needs for the bulk purchase option are lower. You don't have to deal with that ongoing maintenance. There's still certainly maintenance of the pump station, the pipelines, things like that, but it's not quite as intensive. And then again, just to point out, reliability of your supply backup components as you're dealing with now. Again, supply is vulnerable to potential issues, right? The more backup component you have, so that if you do have an issue at one of your wells, or if you go with the interconnection option, having some sort of backup to address that is really important. The hybrid option does allow a little bit of both, right? It gives you some control over your existing sources. Again, if you do have an issue with existing supplies, you have the interconnection as an option, and vice versa. The interconnection that's an issue you do have existing wells. So again, there are some advantages and disadvantages of each of them. I'm talking about the cost. Again, unfortunately, it's not an easy answer as far as what the best option is. Because the good part, although it's costly, you do have feasible options to address it. And again, optimistically, there should be some funding opportunities to help you address it as well. So I think that's the what we wanted to present. Obviously, we're very open to questions. I know that again, it's a highly interested topic. We tried to again provide at a high level, just the key points here. But if anybody's any questions, we can certainly welcome these. And I'm not sure how you guys want to handle the question component.
All right, well, I just wanted to first thank everyone for coming out, and I believe we have about 20 people online also, so thank you for coming out. And I just want to let you know that the general YouTube. Oh, and also on YouTube, I understand we have people watching this. So the General Administration Committee, which I am the chairman of, met last week. We had a presentation by Mike and Laurie, and they went over a much more detailed report that has more detail, more information. And we were able to ask lots of questions. So we're at that stage. Tonight's presentation to the public. Council intends on taking action at our next borough council meeting. So tonight there will be no action being taken. So tonight is just strictly for you to ask questions And I'll just allow him to pick on people and answer questions at this time.
If you could please,
Oh, yeah.
take down your name and your street address.
Have a sign.
We do, but I'm sure that.
Oh, it's in the back table. If on the way out, if you could sign your name, if you speak, your name and your address, that's just so we have it for the record.
We're gonna do the room first and then Zoom, because I have some people raising their hands.
Let's do the room first. Go ahead.
Sir, can you give us your name and address?
James Barner, 55 Old Second Street. What helped us, we know, we being so down, but it's because of cancer. And also, with the neighboring townships, like Wilford or over they had the same problem, sharing the cost. Water and aquifer was both of those areas.
Good question. So I'll kind of touch on the second one because it's easier to do that first, right? In terms of so again, we specifically were focused on Lehigh County Authority, City of Allentown for the best option for potential. Certainly, again, they're subject to the same regulations. Preliminary data shows that they're actually in good shape. They've got multiple sources. PFAS tends to impact groundwater sources significantly more than surface water sources. LCA relies on surface water sources as well as a couple of springs. Again, preliminary data shows that one of the springs may be slightly elevated, but again, with their different sources, they're positioned well to address it. Again, ultimately, they're responsible for addressing those chemicals no different than PFAS. So if they do exceed, they would be responsible for treating it no different than them. But again, as far as preliminary data suggests that they're in a pretty good position. No, it's largely because they're not heavily relying on groundwater sources. Okay.
So there's no sharing costs with that. What supplies with that?
I can't speak to that, again. In terms of when we talk about that range of costs, right? When the borough charges you for water, again, they factor in their operations and maintenance equipment, having to replace equipment, things like that. LCA would do the same thing in terms of what they would charge you. LCA with the city. So they would factor in treatment costs, cost of actually delivering that water, manpower, things like that. So if they did have to treat, again, there would be some component that would be built into the cost. Again, how you would work that out could be all part of the negotiation process with LCA. In terms of the first part of the question, neither Lori nor I are involved in the setting of these limits, right? EPA has, basically scientists, engineers, a whole committee that studies the health effects of these chemicals, and that's how they base the limits. Okay, so again, they set that limit based on studies that show this is, where they want to be as far as the goal. Again, that's kind of where they're saying that the health risk is set. These chemicals, again, have been around for a long time. This is a new issue that surfaced in terms of the detection of the chemicals, the awareness of these chemicals. Okay. So again, it has been, it's not like this is all of a sudden new. The regulation is new, the need to treat it is new. Do you have anything out in terms of, again, the health effects? Like I said, we're on the back end of this in terms of not what the limits are, not what the health effects are, but
So there's been a variety of them. I mean, the one that I do recall is cancer, and I forget which specific kind of cancer they saw increased risk of, and I believe there were also some other additional risks that were more associated with like children. Obviously there were no sense, and I have to go back and review exactly what the other specific issues were.
and the thing to point out when they set these regulations too, you know, again, they've already targeted the manufacturing component of it. As Lori pointed out, I mean, nonstick cookware is one of the common uses of these chemicals in the past. So when they set these health limits, again, they're looking at a wide variety of environmental factors. The water regulations, one component, they factor all that in. So again, just even, and again, I can't speak to the actual numbers, but if there wasn't other environmental factors at play, it very well could be that that water limit would be notably higher, but they factor all these things in together in terms of setting.
Mike, if I could jump in, you said these chemicals have been around for a while. I just want to clarify that it just recently has been detected in the
Correct.
borough. It hasn't been in the water in the borough for a while. Just recent, it's been around.
Thank you, thanks for clarifying. I didn't mean, what I meant is these PFAS chemicals, again, have been used for quite some time, right? They've been detected more recently, and again, as we talked about, they're transmissive, right? They originate at a source and then eventually kind of get into the groundwater. So it takes a long time for that.
And Mike, I've been told by DEP that less than 50% of the wells in Pennsylvania have been tested.
Yeah.
And that includes Lehigh Valley, like less than half of all the
So-
wells in Lehigh Valley have been tested.
Yeah, and
So we don't even know what other towns' levels are.
yeah, I mean, again, it's an unfortunate situation that you're in, but you are at least ahead of the game compared to other municipalities. Proactively testing your wells, you know, and this is just hitting now, and there's a very good chance that a large majority of wells within the state are going to have these regulations.
My name is Michelle Constantine, 134 Colonial Court. So then if we got the water from Allen and they've already been checked and their levels are completely low. Any place we would get the water from their levels.
They would have, so in other words.
They haven't.
Again, these regulations are not even official, the new regulations are even official yet. Currently, LCA is below the existing levels. The proposed levels, again, this is all brand new information, they're gonna be right on the border. But bottom line, in order to sell that water to you, they would have to be below those levels. They would not be able to sell the water to you. It's already treated. And again, I'm getting better if I'm skipping over before, it's just whichever.
Donna Sows, 325 Alpine Street. Just to build up of your question. So if Allentown discovers next year that they have an issue with it, we've got another 2.5 years worth of their development to fix that problem. That's got to be considered in the option we choose.
I think it's a valid comment. Again, no different than the borough and pretty much any system that's being proactive right now. They're out testing their existing sources to figure out what they can have to do. So the time limit would be similar again, from what we've seen initial data wise, they're well positioned to address that. But that's correct. I mean, if they had to do additional treatment, same concept they were working at.
And then that cost to fix that would trickle down to us as well. So
Correct. Now, there is
it's quite
some-
risky to.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's some economies of scale for treatment. Okay, so again, the borough, smaller systems are impacted the most by these types of regulations, just because the cost of treatment, you know, per gallon is higher. Okay, so Allentown, much bigger customer base, they could spread that cost over a bigger customer base. So there is some economy of scale as well, but otherwise, what you're saying.
And that we discovered it recently in our water. Had we tested before that and it was not in there?
Right.
So it could show up in Allentown 3 years from now. Okay,
It's
I just
any,
didn't know.
any source, I said, these chemicals, they move, right? So any source that state is subject to eventually, it could be below, and no different in your, you know, we talked about wells 4, 6, and 7 being lower right now. Not to say they could be higher in the future.
Well, great.
Mhm.
Yeah, Nora Goldstein, 411 Barrett Road. Couple of things, you mentioned that the people and, PFAS, are no longer in use. Those are the longer chain compounds, shorter chain compounds are, and we're exposed to PFAS from all kinds of sources. And one of the challenges with this issue coming to the fore now is it's almost in advance of best available control technologies to really know how to treat. There's a lot of unknown. So my question is, how much research has been done with the proposed technology for treatment? And, and then the other question is where it's at right now at the proposed EPA limit in those wells. Do you know what the sources of the PFAS chemicals are?
Yeah, I can't address the sources, but I can say that, in terms of research for the treatment technologies, the two we mentioned, GAC in particular has been researched significantly, and ever since this issue has been addressed, the past maybe 5 years or so, those systems that identified PFAS early on have implemented that, and it's been, so they've been in operation, they've been working effectively at various concentrations, removing it effectively. The resident is a little newer, but again, that's been adopted at several water systems in operation, like New York, New Jersey, and passed regulations a little earlier than Pennsylvania, so they've been implemented and tested. And again, those are effective, and we know they're effective. In terms of, at least for PFOA and PFOS, there's about 8 that are more widely known and established and monitored currently. As I mentioned, there's a lot of these that have not been as well researched. So, it's a building case of research. They are definitely, EPA is still moving on research as to these other classes of the PFAS.
Jenny, you want to address the source part or?
So two of the wells are near creeks. And they get a lot of the water from underground springs around the creeks. We don't know what the levels in the creeks are. But I wouldn't be surprised if the creek water doesn't test positive for PFAS. Sure, I mean, it sounds like you've done your research, so I'm sure you read the study on freshwater fish and high level of PFAS in freshwater fish coming from the rainwater into the creeks. So, so two of the wells are very low levels. I mean, as Mike had said, we've tested them twice. The same well tested 0 the second time we tested it, but it tested at, I think it was rated 4 or 5 first time we tested it. So, so we're not exactly sure where those are coming from. They're in the single digits, which doesn't make you feel any better because they're still detectable levels, but it's not like well 1 and 2 where we know where those sources are from.
Alice Fortunato, 231 West 7th Street. I have 2 questions. So are you sort of not leaning towards the first option, the treatment option, because there's some insecurity or uncertainty about the success if we went that option of treating?
I wouldn't say that. I think that, again, the technologies have been researched. We're pretty confident that they will address the proposed limits. Right. The point I brought up before is that these regulations are ever evolving, right? We don't know what the next regulation is 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It may require some other form of treatment. But in terms of the issue that you're dealing with now, we're comfortable that the technology will address.
Because it's by far the cheaper option and we would have more control. So that's what I was thinking about. Just a second question. Do we know, is there a map of where each well is?
Yeah, we didn't add that to our PowerPoint, but
Yeah, I mean, I can give you kind of a quick. So the 2 wells that are the highly contaminated are right off of Clients Lane, out by the fire training grounds. So those wells are right near each other. They actually feed into the same pipeline, so we could actually treat both of them at the same time with a large treatment system. Another well, if you go out the Borough Line Park, all the way out by the baseball field, is that well. Then at Community Park there's a well. And then if you go all the way up Macungie Avenue, all the way out to the very end, we have a well out there. So those are the 5 active.
This is related to that, so do the houses get fed from those wells exclusively, or does the water go to a main source and then get
It's essentially blended.
this one?
You know, the way it works is the water enters the system at the point of the well. So, you know, certain parts of town are going to be a higher concentration of one well than another, but it is a blended source. Eventually, the water is pumped into, you've got some storage tanks in town that would kind of be highly blended, that things out of the tanks. So it would be a mixture. I mean, sometimes you're going to have certain areas, depending on location, is going to have a higher concentration from one source, but ultimately it's a blended supply of all the sources.
If I might add also, she asked you, you know, what you thought was the best and whatnot, but council will be making that decision, but we also asked them that same question, but his company was hired to present the options to us and give us the pros and cons of each option and the costs. And we have to factor all those things, and that's all the questions that we have to ask. And that as a council, we have to make that decision. And we did try to get that from him, and he was very diplomatic about it, because really, there's no one, other than the one that we eliminated, there's no one complete right answer, because we can't see the future. So we got to balance everything.
Yeah, you know, again, like, if cost was the only component, even that, you know, book out cases, it's capital versus the annual, right? Which you know, again, something that may factor into this is the capital costs are the ones that are covered by funding, right? So maybe that weighs a little bit more than the upfront capital isn't as harsh, because that there's potential coming up things there. But the softer stuff is the stuff that we as kind of engineers, I wish I was able to dissect and say, hey, this is the best answer, but the reality is the softer stuff in terms of, again, predicting what the future regulations are, the borough's capability to handle those future regulations, the staffing component, being able to maintain your own wells. That's the stuff that, again, specific, I think, to the borough, which is why unfortunately I can come in and say this is without a doubt the best option.
You mentioned that full music firefighting be one source of that. I recall not long ago, there was a concern about this down, I think, by Hackborough, Willow Grove Naval Air Station. Maybe you should look into what they did to control the farmland which we're facing down there.
We actually designed a facility.
On the base,
Yeah, so we were involved with that. That was one of the earlier ones. And you're right, it was related to firefighting chemicals. We implemented treatment there.
and that was radioactivated carbon, I believe they also put the resin there, so they didn't check both of those technologies, but at the time, the radioactivated carbon had more long-term data on this people, so, it was radioactivated.
So was that a cheaper way to go than some of the other options?
You know, I can't speak to that situation, but something to keep in mind too is, the system location is gonna have a big impact in terms of that bulk purchase option. Some of them may not be an option. There's no adjacent utilities that can supply economically efficiently. So I can't speak, I wasn't involved in the background.
Yeah, in that case, we weren't asked to evaluate options, we were just asked to tell them how they could treat it, so, we didn't really look at intersections, but I do know the groundwater in a wider area had been, had extended out further, so I don't know what the local options were to supply the base.
And, something that's come up a couple times now again is this effectiveness of this treatment. Again, these treatment technologies have been in use in some areas already. Highly researched in terms of, again, this PFAS issue has been common in the water issue for at least about 5 years. So as far as when really this seriously concentrated. So a lot of research in terms of what the most effective way to treat is. Now, again, those studies can't address, again, is it cheaper to treat versus pull from another source or that kind of thing, because that's all site specific, but the treatment component itself has been higher.
Diane Moore, South Second Street. So are you saying the neighborhoods, if you check neighborhoods throughout the borough, the neighborhoods closest to wells number 1 and 2 would have higher concentration than say a neighborhood on McCundy Avenue out at the end?
It's not a simple thing, yes or no. I mean, certainly there's a possibility of that. So again, the way that the system works, the existing sources are treated right now. They're treated to the existing regulations right now. Chlorine data, things like that. At that point, the water enters the system right at that point. Okay. So in simplistic sense, you know, if you were, you know, taking from the pipe immediately downstream of the well, it almost be exclusively water from the well. Once you get out in the system, again, it starts blending. Okay, so the ratio, you could do some advanced studies to figure out what that ratio is, but the ratio is kind of a bit of an unknown. Certain times of day, it's going to be higher concentration again. Sometimes, as I mentioned, ultimately the water, the way storage tanks work, the way the system works is when there's demand in the system, that water is kind of taken on demand. It's consumed as it's being pushed into the system. When the demand is lower in the system, right, that water is kind of filling up your tanks, and then the water kind of backfills out of those tanks. So there's different times of day. It's a blend in terms of, you know, again, what that concentration would be. Generally speaking, though, yeah, the closer you are to a given source, there's a higher concentration of that source in the water.
If I could jump in, well 2 is actually closed. That was the one that had the highest amount, and we shut that down, and we're able to operate without that well. So we're currently operating on 4 wells.
Yeah, DEP would not let us shut down the second well because of supply numbers that we have to have in the system. So the one that has the 100 parts per trillion is still operating. So the one with 1,000 parts per trillion has been shut down since, you know, we found out in the testing.
Or did we think about the feasibility study of shutting down the house?
DEP flat out told us we weren't allowed to shut down a second well.
Ma'am, it was part of the consent decree. We were not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Legally, we were obligated not to do it. They made a mandate to us, and that was part of the consent decree that we reviewed and signed.
Because that was the first thing we said was, well, we're gonna shut both down and figure it out later, but it lowered the supply to what they felt was a non-acceptable level. The other 3 wells couldn't produce at a high enough level to supply the town.
Terry Ekman, 302 Minor. You guys say you already eliminated one of these options. Which one have you eliminated?
The one that you mentioned was the drilling of a new well.
The drilling of a new well.
Yes.
To me, when you sound with the bulk water, to me, the best option would probably be to treat these wells, since the 2 are pretty close to what we need already. Now, I don't know what you guys are thinking, but are you gonna take input next meeting from people?
So the way we, just like this evening's meeting, where there's a public appeal at the very beginning, you're allowed to ask your questions or put your input in at that moment. But when we're actually debating the issue before the vote, you will not be able to participate in that debate, only at the public appeals part.
Okay.
But you can share you guys can share your opinion right
Absolutely.
now. That's what this meeting is
If
about.
you have an opinion now, you can.
I think treating is probably the best way to go. I mean, I know the cost is a little bit more, but you know, if we buy water from Allentown, who knows what that's gonna be in a year or 2. You know, that could put higher cost on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Question?
I have a question sort of about the technology of filtration, I'm just being ignorant here. So does the filtration system, either one of them, the car active or the does that concentrate the PFAS chemicals?
Any of the treatment technologies concentrate, well, for groundwater, these levels, like current technologies, they concentrate it. The
Okay.
granular activated carbon and resin, they basically concentrate it on a solid media. It absorbs it, it holds it there. And then when it's saturated essentially and it's not removing anymore, it gets disposed of.
And so
A couple of options.
My second
Yeah.
question, how and where is it disposed of?
So there's two options. One is heating, either incineration or what's called regeneration, where they basically heat it to the point where it does destroy the PFAS. The other option is that it can go to a hazardous waste landfill appropriately, you know, and that's an evolving science too, in terms of, you know, how that should be handled. So, but right now, generally, it's incinerated, or if there's landfill or hazardous waste disposal site, they can send it to the cost of disposal there.
Lisa Grove, 627 West Greenleaf Street. I am a borough resident. I'm also the chief executive officer for Lehigh County Authority. Not here to make a presentation, really here to listen. I'm a resident of the borough, very interested in what's going on. Really appreciate the proactive way that the borough has been dealing with this issue. And I just wanted to make a comment that on Lehigh County Authority's behalf, whatever option is best for the borough, will support. And we have a vested interest in a couple of different ways. We're the regional wastewater service provider, so we receive water that we all use here in the borough. And that wastewater has PFAS in it too. We also serve about 450 customers that live outside of the borough. We purchase water from the borough system and serve those customers. So we absolutely want to see this problem solved on behalf of those customers. And I just wanted to say that if the borough were to decide that an interconnection was in the borough's best interest, that we would be there to serve and to provide water that meets all federal and state needs. Thank you.
Next over Franklin Street, Emmaus. Has there been any calculation done on the concentration of the blended water coming into the system? I mean, we talked about the wells individually, where the parameters are. What about the blended?
Within the existing borough system?
Yes.
I don't think we've seen. one of those.
No, you guys haven't.
Have you
No.
done anything?
So last summer when we did testing at people's houses, you know, as part of the water mandates that you have to do. Like we obviously saw PFAS levels at their houses, but they were reduced. You know, they weren't at a level of 100 or 1,000 or anything like that, but they were, I would say that they were still not at where EPA is saying 4 or under, which is a very, you know, it's a very high mark to hit. So no matter what, it would still be a concern trying to blend, you know, untreated water with the other water.
Either Mike or Shane, can you please explain, there's two different standards. There's the state level, the Department of Protection, environmental protection, and then there's also the federal level. And the state level is actually higher than the federal level that just came out. If we could just explain that, because you might have heard a couple of times what we referred to, we were meeting the standards and then we weren't. That's because one's a state standard and one's a federal standard. So maybe you can address the numbers for those.
Yeah, so DEP tells us down the level, the dock regulations, and then at the federal level, they often set maximum contaminant levels there, then push down with the state. So again, this PFAS issue has been, you know, again, aware in the water industry for years. Various states went ahead and started setting the levels. DEP went ahead and did that, and then we're doing this within the past month here. EPA set this regulation that would be pushed out nationally with the states would have to.
Yeah, and that's, the changing regulations are really a factor of changing science. You know, as more research has been done, they better establish at what levels they cause health effects. That's why these limits keep coming down. Pennsylvania said it ranked a little earlier, and they used the best science at the time to set those. Then the federal, you know, more research was done, and the federal government set lower levels. Is where that comes from.
Yeah, and so, yeah, for the last year and a half, we've been looking at 2 wells and concentrated all of our efforts on 2 wells, and the price tag would have been less than a third of this until March. You know, when EPA said, no, the bar isn't 14 parts per trillion, the bar is 4 parts per trillion. Because our other wells were definitely under the 14. But that quickly turned us into, oh geez, we need to look at these other 3 wells. We need to examine those in the study. We need to get better data too. We just tested again the other day. It'll be a couple weeks before we get those results on all the wells, but we need to focus on those just as much.
Each source has to be below the EPA level.
Yeah, not everywhere it enters, yeah. So now, we talked about City of Allentown, all their sources are treated at the same spot. So at that point, they could establish, well, this hasn't been said, there's a likelihood potential the contaminant level is going to be whatever enters the system, right? But if each source enters separately as your system. And again, the timing of the regulations, it was a challenge for us because we were 95% done with the study and this came out, so we had to go back. But it's also good timing for you. I mean, if you're going to address it, you might as well address this now. As we talked about, hopefully there's funding opportunities that could apply to all 5 wells, as opposed to kind of going down the road of addressing 1 or 2, and then ultimately a year from now have to do it.
Anyone else?
I just have one more question. So we hired a consultant firm to get us the information and the data. Is it ever in the budget to hire a consultant firm that could help, that could actually do some decision making about this complicated scientific information? Because we are obviously all lay people and we have a feeling we want to go this way or that way, but we're not, expert at projections.
Ma'am, the answer to that is the power vested by the borough code actually means borough council has to make this decision. They can be advised by professionals. I mean, for example, there's a borough engineer, there's me, the borough solicitor, who hire outside professionals. They provide that information to borough council. Borough council then, as your elected representatives, makes that choice. You cannot delegate that authority outside of the borough.
But, okay. Is this consulting firm, or that they're not giving us any projections or opinion about the decision, they're just simply giving us the data, correct?
Correct, because borough council has to make that decision.
Right, but.
So you're asking.
Say this looks like you have. This looks like you have.
They are providing us with that information.
So they have a full report that they also have submitted to us.
This is more for public consumption, what's being provided tonight. You're not being given all the data because you've elected representatives to make those decisions for you.
Yes. Is this report on the borough website?
We're going to post it tomorrow.
It's a 22-page report.
Yeah, we're going to post it.
In terms of the future, one of the unknown in terms of future regulations, right? We are always monitoring once, again, this PFAS issue has been brewing for years, so we knew this was coming. There's nothing I think that we're aware of that we see as far as upfront hit in the next few years in terms of existing new regulations.
I mean, we expect that probably in the next 5 years, there may be more PFAS regulations, because again, there's a lot of these, they're regulated right now, actually 6 of them. We don't even have concentrations necessarily for all of those in the well, at least not the data I've seen. They are doing what they call it, the unregulated contaminant monitoring. They basically have systems go out and monitor for some of the contaminants to see how prevalent they are, what concentrations. It's 26 more of those that are being monitored now. So I would expect that more of these are going to end up in regulations in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Well, and our solicitor just mentioned that in addition to that, the Chevron case that's in front of the Supreme Court right now could also change what can and can't be regulated. So the Supreme Court seems to be interjecting itself into what environmental regulatory agencies are going to be able to do. So that's going to be another factor, I think, in future years as to what regulations may or may not be.
We don't know. A case was just taken up that may actually eliminate the Chevron test, which is something that addresses how administrative agencies like EPA can make these rulings. If that case is overturned, that will change everything we do. And I see Mr. Stover nodding, who's also an attorney. So it would change things.
if I could interject, it's because they're not elected officials making the laws versus the lawmakers making the law. It could still become law, but it would have to be passed through the
Correct.
legislature.
It's a hyper-technical legal argument as to whether Congress can delegate its authority to a regulatory body or whether the Congress in and of itself must make the ruling and or the law that would be applicable. So it's kind of the kind of stuff we dealt with in law school, like theory, as opposed to more practical sense, because it's been in place for 45 years, but it was taken up, which means at least 4 justices wanted to review it.
I just want to emphasize that this is a really evolving issue. And I work more on the wastewater side of the picture than the water supply. And when EPA proposed these limits, it's really, there's so much unknowns. Their health effects are truly unknown. And what our industry has basically advised and is pushing for is let's not use these. So let's go up the chain to the companies that are continuing to use these and find alternatives. So it's really important as consumers that we let our representatives know that there should be more pressure put on the manufacturers. What you just mentioned with the Chevron case, I mean, that's like all the things that can go topsy-turvy. But it really, I think, given that you're under a consent decree to do something, you're using the best available knowledge, and truly, it is sort of a current. Too many unknowns to be super certain. It's important to be flexible.
In terms of the unknowns, again, the biggest unknown is the future regulation. Chemicals, originate from, something like that. I mean, we're more confident in existing technology, existing costs, so we can make that determination and maybe solve cost of it. Again, the unknown, which we couldn't answer, or the other answers in 5 years.
Have you offered an opinion about the projected PV options, or that's not your?
You essentially heard our opinion. Where we have to stop short there is again what the borough's comfort level and so again, if it's purely cost, right? We saw the cost, the treatment option standing. There's other factors that weigh in that we can't really answer for the borough in terms of again that control of that source and taking the risk of dealing with those future regulations. So we've offered opinions in terms of, again, these are the facts in terms of what stands out, pros and cons, but we've been unable to basically say this is the best.
Chris Homestead, 914 Liberty Street. First of all, thank you. You answered most of the questions I had without even having to ask them. So is there any data? I know we've been hearing about these 2 types of PFAS chemicals. With the treatment option, you mentioned there are roughly 26. Is there any data to show that the current treatment option would also work for the other 24? Or would there then need to be, 2 years, 5 years down the line, a new type of treatment or a new type of filter that would then address the different?
The data that I've seen basically shows that these 2 different adsorbents will remove PFAS. The difference kind of between them is and you heard her mention short chain and long chain. They're all very similar, but slight differences usually just how long they are. And as you get to certain lengths, like some of them will, like the treatment may work for 6 months before you need to replace the media. For some of them, it may last for 2 years. So it's just a matter of how long it will continue to remove it before you need to replace it. And that's very dependent on the blend of all of them together in a particular water source, as well as the background contaminants. It will remove them, but how long it continues to remove them is what we don't know because of the different specifics of individual water sources.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you keep pointing out that, what's unpredictable is what's gonna happen as the result of the law. I would emphasize that what's also unpredictable is the, level of health hazard that we have here. And that has to be, we don't always regulate properly. And as a group, as human beings sitting here, I would err on the side of the health of the people in this community. That's all I want to say.
Council Friend, you heard directly from one person what their opinion was.
Yeah.
So would you consider taking a straw poll of all of us who are here?
Sure. All those in favor, I mean, there's a lot more information that we reviewed, but you got the gist of it anyway.
Before you vote, I have a question that might answer something. So what is the cost of doing the treatment option? I know you're, I mean, financially the cheapest, so what's the cost? What's the danger of going the treatment option versus the infrastructure option?
So again, so break down capital costs up front. Treatment of all wells, 15 plus million. Okay.
Aside from cost, what's the risk of using the treatment option? I sort of missed the answer to that.
But basically, the way it goes in top, right? The con treatment option, are a couple things. One is, again, 20 plus years from now, you're looking at higher capital, more costs than the gold purchase. Okay, because the treatment technology, the service life of a treatment.
Okay.
So that's one component.
The treatment is shorter than.
A pipeline. So that's one component. Again, the borough maintaining those treatments is a higher commitment than a pump station pipeline. And then again, we talked fairly extensively about the borough then taking ownership of addressing it. That's kind of the negative.
So Shane brought up a good point. People aren't finished asking questions, and we also have to go, when you're finished asking questions, there's people online that we're going to give an opportunity to ask questions to. So if you don't have any more questions, I would like to move on and give them an opportunity to speak also. So does anybody have any other questions? Just state your name and your address, please. So in the newsletter, our borough manager put a really nice 2-page explanation of everything that's happened up until this point. And in that article, there is mentioned that you can get a home system. Reverse osmosis removes everything. I currently have, I've had one in my house for 20 years, 20 plus years. But reverse osmosis, you can pick a system up, $200 around there. And then just like this system, you'll have to replace the filter every so many months. Some last a year, some are 6 months. It depends what kind of system you get. So
There's also a carbon-based filtration system you can get for your house.
So in the meantime, if it's a real health concern for somebody, maybe somebody is dealing with cancer now, you drink bottled water, or you can purchase a reverse osmosis system.
Just understand that the filter on your refrigerator or a Brita filter is not effective for this. So it needs to be something that's a carbon-based filtration system or a reverse osmosis system.
Kind of what my point was gonna be, but I'm not sure the general, you know, I have a little bit of a chemistry background, so that is something that I'm aware of, but I wasn't sure if that has been, you know, made public knowledge in newsletters. Because I think the first thing that people might do is go out and buy a great filter.
Yeah, so that anybody that's called town hall, that's the first thing we've told them. We also, like Mr. Lavenberg had said, we tried to put it in the newsletter for people. And I'm sure you've all gotten some kind of flyer from water treatment company from around the Lehigh Valley. It was a brilliant marketing technique by them. But yeah, so again, reverse osmosis or carbon filtration system are the two probably most economical options for an in-home treatment system.
I believe we had 10 people speak tonight. If you could please sign your name and address, because the address was easy to understand, but some of the names, especially the last names, might be hard to get into the record. So I believe there's one at the back table. Are there any more questions before I go to our video people? All right, this time on Zoom, we'll allow Sarah to unmute any of our virtual guests. And if there's anyone online that would like to ask a question, if you could, please put your video on and state your name and your address, and then you can ask your question. And that would be the time. All right, now would be the time. So,
Okay, this is Orpha Pupor. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, I live at 951 Fernwood Street. I happened to graduate high school from a small town called Flint, Michigan. And I still have family and friends that live there. Although it was not the complete problem with the water supply in Flint, Michigan, my understanding is that one of the problems that happened with the water system in Flint was they changed the major source of the system, and it traumatized the existing pipe structure in Flint, Michigan, because those pipes were largely old galvanized pipes. And that contributed to the toxicity in the water in Flint, Michigan. So what I'm saying is, I'm not sure if it's a question or that I'm voicing a concern about our taking in an outside source, because most of our plumbing systems in Emmaus are older, again, galvanized pipe systems. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Yes, just to answer this question, or can answer more technical as far as the treatment options, but very good point, very valid point. Ever since the Flint issue, this issue that she mentioned is high on, again, a regulator issue. So anytime you're involved with bulk purchase, compatibility with that water is kind of like that. So you want to add to that?
Yeah, and that is something we, not in detail, but we did touch on in our report, is that anytime you're changing water chemistry in pipes, you need to look at the difference in water chemistry. And we looked at that both from a perspective of blending, if you're doing a combination of treatment and purchase, as well as just totally switching over to a new source. We haven't done a detailed analysis yet, but there are ways to address that through water chemistry. She mentioned Flint, like there was a chemical that they had considered adding to the water that they opted not to, that may have addressed that problem before it got started. And that's the sort of thing we would look at now. There's water quality modeling that we would do, comparing LCA's source to the existing well, and then looking at that chemistry and seeing if any adjustments needed made to maintain the integrity of the system. So we are doing something like that here.
The intent of this phase of the study is really get to a point that you can compare alternatives. Hopefully, again, with enough information, you make a decision on the best alternative. The next step then would be diving down to that next level of detail that we just mentioned. If treatment's the option again, coming up, confirming that the best treatment option, any other treatment issues, things like that. It's kind of essentially a preliminary design of the basis of design component. As the next phase.
Lori, does that address for concern about the difference of the pipes?
Yeah, because we have to be aware, right, when you change water chemistry, like your pipes are attenuated to your water chemistry, and if you change water chemistry, that can affect that coating that's built up on the pipe. So yes, we do consider that as well.
All right, so is there anyone else online who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Now would be the time, and state your name and address. Hello.
Hi, my name's Celeste. I live at 424 North Street, so I'm right down the street from y'all right now. Hi. I just wanted to say I'm super grateful to everyone for being really proactive on this. I have severe chronic illnesses, and this issue is really important to me. I don't know if I have so much of a question as a comment. I did install a whole house filter in my house. We couldn't afford an RO filter, so I got a carbon filter, and it has helped with the levels. But I want to just say, for my piece, I'm all for the treatment of all the wells. And I thought other considerations might be that maybe these filters would help us also with potentially other toxicants that we might not know of yet. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, but I want to say thank you to everybody for being proactive on this issue.
Thank you, Celeste. Can you state your last name, please?
Oh, yes, it's Wook, W-O-O-C-K.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else online who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Hearing of none. All right. Well, just want to add my little 2 cents of information. There are thousands of products with this chemical in it, things that you don't even know about. And there was a suggestion by a lady out there that mentioned that you can do your part by choosing products that do not have these products or these items in it. I just discovered that it's in sunscreen. And if you ever hear of they make sunscreen now that are reef approved, meaning it doesn't hurt the water in the oceans. So you can make choices that doesn't have this chemical in it. It's in a lot of makeup. People don't notice it's in mascara, all your makeup. So you're putting it on your skin already. Also, waterproof clothing, your cookware, your non-stick cookware. It's in thousands of products. It's depressing when you find out. I wish I would have never known, but you can make choices on your own. That's one point. For my studying this or looking into it, first time that I've seen it addressed in Pennsylvania was 2012. There's a private company, water company, Aqua, and they have a system for probably 8 years. There was a great article, I believe it's the Philadelphia Inquirer. And they've been addressing this with, and it's this system that we're looking at. There is, I get it in my newsfeed all the time. As you know, when you look at something on your phone, all of a sudden you get everything from that same item that you looked at. So I get all these news feeds on technology that colleges all over the world, Canada, down in Australia. I'm reading about all these technologies. There will be something down the line, but it might be 20 years out till it gets to a scale for a community use. But that could help us in the future also. And I think that might have to be part of our consideration, because you mentioned 20 years out, but 20 years out, we might have other choices. So with that being said, we'll do just an informal vote by raising your hands. If you don't want to participate, that's fine. But it gives us an idea of what you're thinking at least. And one is, would you prefer, there's the 3 choices, to have the filtration system installed on the wells, to have the purchase of the water from Lehigh County Authority, who purchase their water, they purchase the water from Allentown, correct? So, and then the 3rd choice would be a combination of having a filtration system and having some outside water from LCA. So how many people would be in favor of having our own filtration plants on our wells? Okay. How many would be in favor of purchasing water from LCA? Anyone? And who would be in favor of a combination of purchasing and having filtration? A couple. Okay. 3. All right. That gives us an idea. Thank you very much for coming here. All right. I allowed everyone in the audience to ask questions and bring up their concerns and on the video. At this time, if council would like to make any comments or ask Mike or Lori a question or our solicitor. I'm gonna give you an opportunity now. Anybody would like to make a comment, statement, question? And if not, we'll move on. Councilman DeFrank.
I just want to make one. So Michael, it's in your report and but I didn't hear it as clearly. It said removal of these chemicals. Even though this is the best technology out there, it does not remove 100%, correct?
It removes to detectable levels, right? So it removes to basically the limit of regulation, but below that, again, there's the science isn't available to figure out the levels below.
I just wanted to make sure that that doesn't go out that house potentially could have some. Just want to make sure. Other than that, I'd like to thank you both for the report. I thought I was on GA too, so I got to hear, the full thing last week. So I want to thank you both for the picture of this and for answering all of our questions last week and answering all the residents' questions. And I'd like to thank the residents for coming out because we don't generally see this, but we do appreciate it when you come out and tell us what you're thinking.
And Mr. DeFrank, just Mike, maybe we can clarify a little bit. I think the issue is science. Our issue from the beginning has been the technology for testing. And the science can't test it down low enough to say whether or not it's completely absent or not. I think that's
Just in case it shows up after we do.
I don't even think the testing can, because we've had that issue with testing companies. Like we've said, like, I want nothing in there. Like, can you detect that? And a lot of them, at one point it was, they could only get down to 2 parts per trillion. Now we have a company that can say it's not detectable, but I don't think any of the testing that we know of can actually determine if it's detectable or existent or it's not detectable.
And it says parts per trillion, correct? Per trillion. Which is, for me, mind-boggling. When you're talking 4 parts per trillion.
Mr. President, I just wanted to acknowledge the countless hours Mr. Pepe has spent with DEP, just every resource, including yourself. I can't say, I couldn't even add up the number of hours, probably in years now at this point. There's been a lot of work to get to this point, and we have one more step. We still have a very important step for us as council to make. I encourage you all to come out to our next council meeting as well, so that you can hear, after we deliberate and make a decision. So again, thank you all for being here and with your questions. And we have a tough task ahead of us, but we got a lot of great information. Thank you so much for providing us with the details that we need to make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on council? All right, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. People usually don't, but if you want to, fine. But if not, I'm just gonna take a 1-minute recess, just if somebody wants to leave and not disrupting the meeting. So we'll take a recess. All right, we're reconvening at 7:40. And at this time, we have approval of the April 17th, 2023 meeting minutes. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve it? Councilman Hart, second by. Motion by Councilman Hart.
Got an issue.
What do we got?
That's Bill.
Oh, seconded by Councilman Balliet. What do you spell? Any additions or corrections to the minutes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes. We have some decisions on bids. We have the 2nd Street multimodal project bid. Can I speak to you? Yes. I'm going to turn it over to Shane to explain.
So the South 2nd Street multimodal project, if you recall, we received a sizable grant for that project, and I think to the tune of $575,000. We expected the project cost to be about $850,000. You'll see in one of your tabs, we received 4 bids. One was from Gaver Industries. $586,143. The next one was significantly higher, which was from Marino Corporation at $720,434. And then the H&K Group at $848,408, and Grace Industries at $901,735. We asked because when I saw this, Gaver Industries, first of all, we've never done business with them that I know of. So my first concern was, wow, they're really far under everybody else. And normally when you see something that is that far under everyone else, they miss something in their bid. That's the first concern that I have. But you'll see a confirmation from them because we had our engineers ask them a number of questions. And you'll see they sent us a letter back or an email back saying that nope, they didn't miss anything. They believe strongly in their bid and that their cost that they're projecting is exactly what it should be. So I hope they didn't miss anything, but we have no reason to say or to disqualify their bid. That's one of the reasons why you have bid bonds and performance bonds and things like that. So my recommendation, because they've confirmed that they didn't make any mistakes in their bid, my recommendation would be to go with Gaver Industries for $586,143.
And Shane, what do we know about this company? Anything?
There's nothing, so our engineer researched them, they do know who they are. They've done projects with them in the past. There's nothing that disqualifies them or any red flags that we know of that would disqualify them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to approve Gaver Industries for the amount of $586,143.65 for the South Second Street project? Councilman Anders, second. Councilman Dufresne, any more questions or discussion? Councilman Anders?
Just because of that price change and the grant, does that allow anything, is there anything that we could be doing? Are there any extra funds that?
Well, so that grant is very specific. What it does mean though is we're going to be able to free up some of the liquid fuels money that we've been storing to pay as match money for this. So the grant, the overall what we receive in grant reimbursement is going to be less because it's, I think, 70-30 split.
Okay.
So they won't give us a full 575,000. It's like a carte blanche grant, but they'll give us 70% of what the project cost is, but it will free up some liquid fuels funds, which is that we'll be able to stay for our ongoing road improvement process.
Thank you.
Councilman Dufresne.
This is mostly for Shannon, I guess, the solicitor. A few years ago, I remember how we had a little bit in concrete and turned out to not be, real good quality of work. Does the bond cover that also? If this company would come in and do less than quality work?
So the answer is, when we look at the bid bond, it usually only addresses the specific material, the specific construction. It doesn't usually address, like, for example, 5 years down the road, you would still have to sue them because that bond will most likely have dissolved by then.
Okay. All right, thank you. Questions, discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes. Shane, if it's all right, I'm gonna combine the next two, the sewer van sale and the dump truck sale.
No, you can't. They're different buyers in the end.
Okay, so we'll separate them. Sewer van sale. We had a bid for the sewer camera van for $14,900. Would somebody like to make a motion to accept the bid? Councilman Anders, seconded by Councilman Dufresne.
Just Shane, with sales of these, that income that's from the sale of that will go back to that department, correct? Is that the way we have?
Well, so that's how you handle the last one. I would ask that the Budget and Finance Committee have a discussion on how they want to handle that. Or you can decide as a council, but normally I think Budget and Finance would discuss that. We haven't had that opportunity because of when the deadline here passed.
$14,900, by the way, is an incredible bid price. And the reason is because we left the old Stewart camera in there, that's no longer used. So whoever bought this, that's what they're gonna use it as a private, for their private business, is what their, what their goal is probably gonna be.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, there are 7 ayes. We have the 1995 Ford dump truck sale, and there was a bid for $7,450, I believe, also more than what we were expecting. So somebody like to make a motion to approve that bid? Councilman Balliet, seconded by Councilwoman McManaman. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, there are 7 ayes. That is all we have on decision on bids. Under communications, we received a letter from the Emmaus Veterans Committee for the Memorial Day Parade and Honor Guard announcement. The Memorial Day Parade is May 29th at 9 a.m. starting at the high school and ends at the Memorial Triangle, followed by the ceremony at the Triangle. And if it rains, do they not have a ceremony in the auditorium? It did not mention that.
There'll be a small ceremony at the.
So if it rains, they'll go just directly to the Memorial Triangle for a small service. Also, May 28th at 8 a.m., starting at Calvary Cemetery, and then proceeding to the other 5 cemeteries, there will be a ceremony and 21 gun salute for each cemetery, I guess. I think they do it at each cemetery. Yeah. So. And I believe Councilwoman McManaman has a communication to bring forward, so.
Thank you, Mr. President. We received correspondence from Jean Clark, the president of the Mass Homestead, wanting us to know that the 3 historic sites have been meeting monthly since the beginning of the year. Their whole goal and vision is that they can work together, possibly have fundraising events and combine membership drives and that kind of thing. So I did forward that to all of council.
That's great, and I see that they're going to try to combine events, which just makes it more valuable because, well, let's face it, they're in the same ball game, and they might as well group together and promote it together. So
yeah, they do a wonderful 3rd grade education project together. They'll do passport of history. Each of the houses will be open, as well as the Founders Day dinner. So, yeah, there's quite a few things that they want to be collaborating on.
all right, thank you. Anyone else have a letter to bring forward? Communication? All right, hearing none. There's no borough engineers report, solicitors report.
No report progress.
Progress. All right, unfinished business part 1. We have 3 ordinances. All 3 of them are second readings. We had our first reading in the April 3rd meeting. Ordinance 1241, an ordinance of the Borough of Emmaus amending chapter 15 of the Consolidated Code of Ordinances, extending residential permanent parking areas to additional street throughout the Borough of Emmaus. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1241? Councilman Hart, second by Councilwoman McManaman. Any questions on the ordinance? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote. Councilwoman McManaman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Baumgartner.
No.
No. Councilman Anders.
Aye.
Councilman Layberg, aye. Councilman DeFrame.
Aye.
Councilman Hart.
Aye.
Councilman Balliet.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes and 1 no. Moving on to ordinance 1242, an ordinance of the Borough of Emmaus amending chapter 15 of the Consolidated Code of Ordinances, extending school zone parking restrictions on portions of Harrison Street, amending 2-hour parking requirements on certain sections of Main Street, and amending disabled parking hours at a portion of North 5th Street. Somebody like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1242? Councilman Hart, second by Councilwoman McManaman. Any questions or comments on ordinance 1242? Hearing none. Also a roll call vote. Councilwoman McManaman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Baumgartner.
Aye.
Councilman Anders.
Aye.
Councilman Layberg, aye. Councilman DeFrame.
Aye.
Councilman Hart.
Aye.
Councilman Balliet.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes. And our last ordinance on our unfinished business, we have ordinance 1243. An ordinance of the Borough of Emmaus amending chapter 6 of the Consolidated Code of Ordinances, repealing a section of part 3 alarms and automatic protection devices, including sections of subsection 6 through 302, subsection 6 through 303, and subsection 6 of 308, to amend sections of the code that are not enforced. Somebody like to make a motion to approve ordinance 1243. Councilman Hart, seconded by Councilman Valiant. Just to mention, this is just correcting language, correct?
No,
Or no,
this is to get rid of an archaic requirement to register your alarm system with the borough.
thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Roll call vote, Councilwoman McMahon,
Aye.
Councilwoman Baumgartner, Councilman Ayers,
Aye.
Councilman Labor, aye, Councilman DeFrame,
Aye.
Councilman Hart, aye, Councilman Valiant.
Aye.
There's 7 ayes. Under new business, we have an ordinance for its first reading, and it's ordinance 1244. An ordinance establishing regulations for the sale and use of consumer fireworks within the borough of Emmaus. So I will turn this into the Public Safety Committee. I will turn it over to Chairman Hart to explain very quick the updated ordinance.
Thank you. Very quickly, in 2017, we established an act that permitted commercial fireworks in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm sure it will have nothing to do with being lobbied by the fireworks industry. Nonetheless, it created the expected disasters as far as noise ordinances and increased harm to citizens. Recall that we actually signed a letter to our representatives asking them to repeal that act or modify it. Well, it took until 2022 to come along with Act 74, which amended that first act. 74 allows municipalities to issue permits for the use of displays, enacting regulations of consumer fireworks, including requiring permits to set off, allowing regulations to require verifications of distances and structures and vehicles, and to set our limitations on the use of fireworks. So remember, we should know that this act still permits non-permit setting off of fireworks on July 2nd through July 4th, December 31st, Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, according to the act. We suggested that we would grant weekly basis for the sale of consumer fireworks in the borough, which is how they're usually sold in non-brick and mortar tents that appear. They would have to come to us for approval of that. We're stating that we will permit fireworks to be set off within 150 feet of any structure in the borough and will not be able to be ignited on any borough property without previous approval by borough council. That's basically the sum and total on it. With that, I think I'm going to feel free.
Motion by Councilman Hart, is there a second? Councilman DeFrame. I'm not opposed to this, but I think we need to clean this up quite a bit. For one, I believe we should have definition of what commercial fireworks are and consumer fireworks. And not only that, the difference between the ones you need a permit for and the ones that you can set off at your house. I think we definitely have to have that.
Do we need to do that? Because Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we stole the language from Act 74. The act itself defines what those are.
So how does it, okay, you can buy those packs at Weiss Market, Giant, Walmart, anywhere.
Those are not considered commercial fireworks. And here, I can email, if you want, I can email you the act. You can see what it is. I actually probably sent the research I probably sent you, probably have the citation in it, and it has a link in it. I'll forward that to you.
Okay.
But it doesn't, that, because it's already defined by the act, we don't have to do that extra work.
All right, so like section 1, it says sale of consumer fireworks, but below it says commercial fireworks. And it refers back and forth between commercial and consumer.
Consumer is purchased, commercial is commercial grade. Those are those are terms of the act. Now, like I said, this can be cleaned up if that is an issue, but that comes from the act itself.
And then the one other part is, under permit fees. You have permit fees listed, and then on this page 3, second last paragraph, it says about where you can purchase to issue permits as well as citation for violations and stuff. I think if you're gonna put where you can purchase the permits, I think it should be under the section where the permit fees are, not in this a separate area that's. I don't know, I just think it makes sense to put it all in one spot instead of on a third page where it's not even. You have a section where it says.
I
permit fee.
understand that. What we did was we created a section, just like every other. So the way that we broke this down is how every other piece of your borough code is. Anywhere where the borough code says fees, it has a separate section established for fees.
That is that, so you can amend your fee schedule.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
that's why we did it, because if you look at the top of that section 6 front, where it says the following fees established in this section,
yeah,
beginning in the fiscal year pursuant to adoption, the ordinance should be established each year via resolution. So that's why we put it, fees as its own section there. That's pretty standard.
can we lump that paragraph in with section 6?
It is, that's what I'm saying.
No, it's under section 7.
No, it isn't. Section 7 is kind of
I'm
like,
referring to this paragraph here.
so. What paragraph? You talking about this paragraph? This right here? That's it, that officers can enforce it.
No, it says.
No, that's
Issues permits.
understood, but what that section is, that's being further ordained that we have the authority to enforce, to issue, that is a standard piece of
It's
language.
legislative
All right,
language that lays out.
All right, and then the other part is. I know you got this right from something else, but section 1A, it goes capital A, capital B. I'll give you an example, on section 2. Under B, it says B and then it has small a, small b, small c, and it has I.
Because it's a subsection of B.C.
So that would be cited as section 2, subsection B, subsection C to subsection I.
And then you go to section 4A, and then it goes small a, and then it goes I, and then it goes number 1.
That's correct.
But you're gonna get down even more, right?
That's just how outlining works.
For an outline.
All right, I just think I think we should have the definitions in the actual ordinance. My own opinion.
I can pull the act, and if I can talk to Mr. Pepe and add that, and perhaps that can be addressed.
That's a follow question.
It's ready for a vote when it's ready, but I mean, it's still a discussion.
Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, you have a first and second.
Any other questions? Roll call vote. Councilwoman McManaman.
Aye.
Councilwoman Baumgartner.
Aye.
Councilman Anders.
Aye.
Councilman Ladenburg. Aye. Councilman DeFrank.
Aye.
Councilman Hart.
Aye.
Councilman Valiant.
Aye.
There's 7 ayes. So those corrections, those definitions will be put in.
I'll send you what they look like in the act, and you guys can decide if you want to amend it. I mean, that wouldn't be a substantive change because you're simply adding in something that already exists.
So we don't normally.
So that's a state ordinance, a state law, right?
Right.
So I just think if somebody wants to look up a law for Emmaus, they shouldn't have to go to 2 different places. I think it'd be nice if they could just say, this is
I
where.
understand that we have a whole lot of amending to do in our borough.
No, it's specifically this, I'm asking just for the definitions, that's it. All right. Moving on.
Before your next council meeting, I'll ask because it's not gonna get adopted until June, but I'll ask the public safety committee if they want to have it or not.
Under unfinished business part 2, we have nothing. Does anybody have anything to bring forward on items not on the agenda? Hearing none, mayor's report.
Thank you. In your iPads this evening, you will find 2 proclamations. First one is Proclamation 2023-557, which is in recognition of Police Week. Police Officer Memorial Day is actually May 15th. So for the week of May 14th to the 20th is known as Emmaus Police Department Week. So we see an officer, thank you for their service. They don't hear that often, but please do. Also, you have proclamation 2023-558, which is in reference or in recognition of the International Compost Awareness Week, which is next week, May 7th to the 13th. And this year's theme is for healthier soil, healthier food, compost. Thank you, Mrs. McManaman, for that one. Also, the department did receive notification from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We will be receiving a grant in the amount of $86,770. This was the grant that Deputy Chief Hampshire had submitted during our budget process. It's not nearly what I was hoping for, but we are getting grant money, which is a good thing. So other than that, I'll report progress.
Thank you. Committee reports, Public Works Committee, Chairman Anders.
Yes, nothing for official action. Our next meeting is Wednesday, May 17th at 4 p.m. via Zoom and with no report of progress.
Thank you. House Sanitation and Codes Committee, Chairman Balliet.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we have a few things for council's consideration. The first on the list is a professional service agreement with Barry Isett. And basically what this is with our not full codes department right now, we're going to be able to lean on these guys for some plan reviews, inspections, all that. They're also going to help cross-train our current codes officer. It's a pretty basic agreement. We kind of discussed it at the at our committee, and we just need the council's approval. So with that, I'll put it in the form of a motion.
Motion by Councilman Balliet. Is there a second? Councilman Hart, discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes.
All right, the second part to that would be their fee schedule. So this is going to supplement.
Go.
This will supplement our fee schedule, and keep in mind the prices of this stuff is increased a little bit compared to what our fee schedule is, but this is not a forever thing. We have some things in the works. We've got some interviews coming up and whatnot, so we need to adopt their fee schedule. So I put that in form of a motion.
Motion by Councilman Balliet, second by Councilwoman McManaman. Any discussions or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes.
The next is a escrow. ESCO release for Tillman Street Security, the amount of $218,419.10. Attached in our packet is all of the stuff that they have met, and our engineer says that it is okay to release these funds.
Motion by Councilman, placing that in form of motion. Motion by Councilman Balliet, second by Councilman Dufresne. Any questions on that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes.
The next thing on the list is we have one more extension option left with Whitetail for our refuge and recycling.
Is this a 6th year?
Or fifth year extension, so it would be our. Yeah, it's our 5th extension. There's a 6 overall. It's a 3rd extension.
We took advantage of the extensions.
Yep. This extension increases the cost of garbage by about $18,000 this year, which would be far less that we're going to expect when we put this out to bid in 2024. We would start the bid process for 25. So this is a great thing for us, and thankful that our contract was as long as it was. So with that, I'll put this in a form of a motion.
Motion by Councilman Balliet, second by Councilwoman McManaman. Any questions or comments on the contract?
I was just gonna point out, I've done 2 renewals for different municipalities this past year. They have doubled the cost. Double.
Well, you gotta think fuel and labor alone.
Well, the dumping fees are also. I just want everybody to be aware that you're gonna feel the pinch on that next year. It's bad.
Is recycling higher as well?
Every single part of
Problem has been is,
industry can tell me.
yeah,
Whitetail is one of the few that's still left, and the other one is JP Mascara. That's it. Those are pretty much all that are putting out bids in Lehigh Valley right now.
Councilman,
Thank you. While we've done a very good job in the past, with realized the committee in negotiating in advance for contracts. Is there a possibility that we can kick off that discussion earlier so that we have a better appreciation for the budget this year and the following?
well, so good question, Mr. Hart. So we have to, we will probably start late winter. 2000, so like January of 24, start putting the bids back together. And we will need to have that bid out probably in May or June of next year for the 2025. Yeah.
anybody else? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, there are 7 ayes.
Attached are our meeting notes from our last meeting. Our next meeting will be May 31st at 4:45. And with that, I'll record progress.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Committee Chairwoman Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no items for official action. Our next meeting is tomorrow, May 2nd at 4:45 p.m.
Thank you. Public Safety Committee Chairman Hart.
Thank you. We already handled the four ordinances that were under consideration this evening. The meeting notes from the 27th appearing there in your packet. There are 3 quarterly reports that we didn't get in here, and we'll have them for you next meeting. With that, our next meeting is scheduled for May 25th at 9 a.m. to someone with that over for progress.
Chairman Hart, there's a question that I forgot on fireworks ordinance. In the original, if I remember correctly, when I read it, the state new ordinance is allowing you to confiscate the fireworks if it's if you catch them setting off illegal fireworks, they're able to confiscate them. Is that part of it? Do you know, Jason?
I'm looking right.
Because I remember reading that somewhere and I didn't know if that, if it refers back to the state ordinance or if we need to put it in ours to confiscate them.
I don't think that's in the actual ordinance.
Okay, and I don't know for sure. I just remember the topic in the newspaper. That's all.
Sorry, what's that?
And we did not discuss that at all.
No, nothing I read on the highlights of the state law, saying anything.
Because
I've read a bunch
thought I
of.
remember
Let's just say
reading that.
that may be specific related to a specific municipality that has some sort of
Okay.
statutory authority.
Because I thought it was a good thing if they could do
We
that.
confiscate them and then we can shoot them off altogether.
Yeah.
If you vote on it. Yeah, but not on borough property.
Unless you prove it.
No, we'll pay our secretary ours. That's all. Thank you. I thought that was part of the state ordinance. I thought I remember reading that, but it could be something that somebody brought up.
We'll take a look
I
at
think
it.
it is, but I'll look.
All right. Progress. Progress. All right. General Administration Committee is myself. We have a residency policy request for non-union employees of 35 miles as the crow flies, correct? And this would be able to increase the pool for new hires, especially for ambulance and codes department is most specifically what we're looking at. So would somebody like to make a motion to change the residency requirements for non-union employees for 35 miles? Councilwoman Baumgartner, seconded by Councilman Andrews. Any discussion on this?
Just to reiterate that this is for non-management, non-union employees, so anybody that's in upper management would still be within the 20. And then the unions, it would be further collective bargaining agreements, which each of them cites.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes. Our next meeting, I believe, is going to be. Oh, wait, Budget and Finance is canceled. Correct.
Yeah.
But GA, you'll have Shannon and Chris here. Are you here, Chris?
You know what, GA, no.
For Thursday. So we won't have a quorum for either one of those 2 meetings
So both budget and finance and,
again.
yeah, okay, no problem. It's canceled.
All right. I report progress.
Change this plan.
Budget and Finance Committee Chairman DeFrey.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, our action item tonight is resolution 2023-17, resolved by Borough Council to authorize payment of the May 1st, 2023 bill list as follows. Bill list $1,065,212.53. Payroll number 8, $188,287.32. Payroll taxes $60,896.74 for a total of $1,314,396.59 on this first of May 2023, and I put that in the form of a motion.
Motion by Councilman DeFran, is there a second? Councilman Balliet? Any questions on the bill list? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are 7 ayes.
You can see the significant revenue and expenses in there. So as we just said, our Thursday meeting's canceled. So our next meeting would be Thursday, May 18th at 11 a.m. via Zoom progress.
Thank you. Community Relations Planning and Development Committee Chairwoman McManaman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing for official action this evening. Our last meeting notes are attached. I would like to highlight that we are going to be working on updating the progress with the Vision 2030. And that will include project updates and goals and an implementation plan towards the vision. Also like to thank Mrs. Jared Eaton for all of her amazing work burning the midnight candles with staff with the website. It looks great and it will only get better. So MASPA.gov. And our next meeting is Monday, May 22nd at 4:30 via Zoom. We report progress.
Thank you.
Your email addresses are also emaspa.gov, by the way. You can still have a long one and still go to it, but emaspa.gov is now the underlying. And so when somebody says, what's your work email? You don't have to tell me another piece of paper. It's hard. It would be hard at emaspa.gov.
And that's without our first initial.
Correct.
MASPA.gov, no dots in there between MAS and PA. Okay. And no initial for your. Okay, thank you.
It doesn't change your login. Your login requirements are different. That's why you're asking about the initial.
Okay. But both will work. Or
Both will work.
all
Both
that.
will work, yeah.
Okay. Under boards and commissions, you have 3 sets of either reports or meeting minute notes. Which leads us to personal appeal part 2. Does anyone have a personal appeal? Hearing none. Is there anyone online yet?
Clear one.
All right, if anyone's on Zoom, if they have a public appeal, just please state your name and what your appeal is. And now would be the time. Hearing none. Borough Manager's report.
So it's that time of year for lifeguards. We hired another new lifeguard. Brooke Davidson has met her lifeguard requirements. Returning employees, we've also brought back Emma Durnan and Alexandria Kosalko. I think I said that correctly. So other than that, our report progress, I think you've had a long enough to.
Yeah, we haven't had one like this in a long time. Under president's business, I have nothing. We have one lone resident still here, so thank you for sticking through it. And Alan, do you have anybody on YouTube yet?
We have 5 people.
You have 5? Oh, well, that's pretty good. And we have 1 on Zoom. So we got 7 people left in the meeting. With that, I'll ask, do we have an executive session?
No.
No? No. I like the sound of
We're
that.
good.
All right, motion to adjourn. Councilman Elliott, seconded by Councilman McManaman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting adjourned at 8:15.